Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A report was released on the feasibility of an Alberta pension plan. We hear from officials as to the logistics of having one moving forward. The province unveiled details of a new addictions recovery facility located east of Lethbridge. The 50-bed recovery centre will allow those recovering to stay for up to a year. And we hear how a Christian organization is helping with cleanup efforts following a devastating wildfire in Hawaii.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith released a report that could lead to a vote on whether Alberta should ditch the Canada Pension Plan. The study from LifeWorks, formerly known as Morneau Chappelle, suggests an Alberta pension plan could save Albertans billions of dollars annually. Alberta Finance Minister Nate Horner says the only way the province could even consider moving forward with an APP, however, is if Albertans voted for it in a referendum and it's beneficial for all Albertans. Horner explained the costs involved in launching an Alberta pension plan.
Into perspective, an APP could cost up to $2.2 billion to set up, but it has the potential to save Albertans $5 billion in the first year if implemented. We know that you have a lot of questions about a potential Alberta pension plan. Questions about portability, governance structure, and who would make investment decisions to keep an APP sustainable, stable, and as safe as the CPP. The release of this report is just the first step in our commitment to engage with Albertans on all their questions. I want to stress that an APP would have to guarantee your benefits. The Canada Pension Plan Act dictates that in order to qualify for withdrawal from the CPP, a provincial plan must provide at least the same level of benefits to its citizens as the CPP. We wouldn't move forward with an Alberta pension plan unless it benefited every Albertan and brought long-term security that Albertans need and deserve.
Now, in the report, the province cited that it's entitled to $334 billion of the Canada Pension Plan, which is over half of its assets. There are some, however, who say that's a flawed estimate. According to University of Lethbridge political science professor Lars Hallström, there are also drawbacks and risks involved in a provincial pension plan.
If you were to just ask people on the street, if you were to see your CPP contributions decline but with the same benefits or maybe an increase, oh, that sounds fantastic. But let's also remember that claiming this money into a provincial plan would include, of course, having to invest that, having to manage those funds. How those funds would be used may introduce risk. And, to be honest, Alberta has a history of economic volatility. So if it's invested in Alberta, which would make sense at some level, you may be actually opening up that fund to a higher risk exposure than some people care for. Most people want to see their pensions, the return may be low, but they want guaranteed and certainty about their incomes in the future.
Hallström also says one of the benefits of a national pension plan is having the flexibility of where you move, live, and work in the country while contributing to a single plan. A new 50-bed recovery community is opened just east of Lethbridge. It's giving Albertans who suffer from addictions the chance at a fresh start at no cost. Dignitaries were on hand for the grand opening, along with some clients who say the facility has been a huge blessing for them. BCN's Angela Stewart has the story.
For 20 years, Lethbridge resident Reed Metherall has been suffering with the disease of addiction. A brave decision to finally get sober has led him here to the new 50-bed recovery community just outside of Lethbridge, which officially opened its doors this week.
It's far better than the alternative. That's the best way I can put it. Life hasn't looked this good, and this good of an outlook for the future in a long, long time.
Hoping to also finally restore his life and happiness is client Christian Morin.
I've experienced great food, shelter, a place to sleep, and a place where I can work on myself, a safe place.
A ribbon-cutting Thursday marked the official grand opening.
This center, this community, is going to allow us to take people who are in the throes of addiction, who are completely captured by this dark disease, and instead of living that out to death, they live it out to new life.
Construction on the $19 million site, which is being run by Fresh Start Recovery Centre, began last year in May. It's now the second recovery community in the province to open, with Red Deer being the first.
This facility is important because what it does, it focuses on long-term recovery. It focuses on those who have the lowest possible recovery capital, those who have spent the resources and their energy and have nowhere else to turn.
A variety of different programs and services are available to clients, including training, employment, and counseling.
It gives the opportunity to clients coming in to develop some vocational skills, maybe close out some of the gap in their resumes, if you will, be able to learn about contributing back to the community, being part of the community.
Up to 200 clients per year will have access to long-term treatment at the facility. 9 more recovery communities are currently under construction or planned for Alberta. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
More solid work is also being done to help those who are battling addictions and mental illness in our First Nations communities. That's according to Charles Weaselhead, who works with the Blood Tribe Department of Health. Weaselhead says the Blood Tribe will be receiving a recovery community as well.
What we plan to do is that we are introducing the Blackfoot recovery to treatment for addiction, So we're going to integrate, the Western model along with our traditional model. And I think our traditional model is really strong on the spiritual aspect of it, the family support, those type of things, So we're very confident, by combining those two ways of healing and dealing with the addiction are going to be an impact, have a big impact in recovery.
Construction for the facility is expected to be completed by late 2024 at a price tag of around $30 million, which will be covered by Alberta taxpayers. Well, it was kind of a mixed bag today in southwestern Alberta. We had some clouds, light showers, and then sunshine. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it's also felt a little cooler. Not surprising since fall is just around the corner.
Oh, you called it. First day of fall coming up on Saturday, and it's going to be a decent day, too, with a high of 19. But before we get there, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves on Friday. Looking at a high of 14 degrees, could see a slight chance of showers as well, and a lot of cloud coverage as well. So it could make it feel a little cooler than it did today. It actually was quite a bit more sunny today than what that graphic is showing. So tomorrow could feel a little cooler with the clouds and the rain. And you know what? I'll be back later in the show to tell you how the weekend is shaping up and next week. And here's a hint. It is going to warm up next week. I'll be back later in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. A class action lawsuit on behalf of 700 unvaccinated Canadians is being launched in federal court. Alberta lawyer Leighton Gray, who's spearheading the campaign, says there are 3 different elements to this very important lawsuit.
There's different classes, 3 different classes of plaintiffs. If people want to join the lawsuit, one is called the employment subclass. This applies to people who lost their jobs because of vaccine mandates due to government interference. There's also a travel subclass. So this is for people who couldn't travel for work or to see loved ones or even for vacations. And then there's a third class. It's called the dual impact class, and that's for people who fall into both of the previous categories. Depending on the number of people who join the class, this case could involve, tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars or more, depending on who ends up joining.
Gray says those who are interested in joining this class action lawsuit are invited to contact his firm directly through their website at gwsllp.ca. The trial of Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Leach and Chris Barber continued in Ottawa. Both are accused for their roles that blocked city streets around Parliament Hill and nearby residential areas. Today, the courts heard Freedom Convoy participants believe the City of Ottawa was entertaining the idea of allowing the big rig trucks to remain indefinitely on the street along Parliament Hill during last year's protests. But Ottawa Emergency Services Manager Kim Ayotte says police never agreed to stage the trucks long term. The name Arthur Pawlowski has been in the news quite a bit over the past few years. He's the Calgary street preacher who was found guilty of mischief and breaching a release order for his role in protests against COVID-19 public health measures. Now, Pawlowski's son, Nathaniel, has also been quite vocal regarding the former mandates. Nathaniel chatted with BCN's Naveen Day about what he saw at the 1 million March for Children in Ottawa. Pawlowski says the mainstream media was not truthful in their reporting of actual attendance numbers.
By my estimate, there was about 15 to 20,000 protesters from what I saw.
Wow.
And there was about 5 to 10,000 counter protesters. So there was roughly 30,000 people on Parliament Hill protesting, whether for or against. But it was a huge, huge movement, lots of people.
It's interesting you mentioned the numbers in Ottawa, because I was following some of the mainstream media that was covering the Ottawa event, and it sounded like there was a huge representation of the LGBT community in Ottawa to counter protest. But you're saying that's not the case?
Yes, I saw that report as well, and that's absolutely false. I mean, there's video evidence. You can see how many of our side there was, and then how many counter protesters, pro-LGBT protesters there were, and mainstream media is lying. They're lying to you. There was, I mean, it's hard to estimate when there's such a huge crowd of people, but there was about 5,000 to 10,000 counter protesters, and there was about 15,000 to 20,000 of us. So no, they were not outnumbering us whatsoever.
You can catch the full interview with Nathaniel Pulowski and BCN's Naveen Day on the weekend edition of Bridge City News. The Fort Macleod Curling Club will be celebrating its 125th anniversary from October 27th through the 28th. The organization will be hosting a huge event coming up to observe the historic milestone. BCN's Micah Quinn has that story.
You walk in the doors, you feel like you're part of the community. It's not just the game, but it is the social aspect.
There is a long list of items on the agenda for the Fort Macleod Curling Club's 125th anniversary event. Staff with the organization said there will be an amazing opportunity through the online auction for participants to test their skills against some of the best curlers from across Canada.
But when you go on there, you can click onto the online Curl with Rockstars. So the top 3 bids will have the right to curl with Shannon Kleibrink, and the top 3 bids that have the bids for Casey Scheidegger will get to curl with her.
The club has a long and storied history in Fort Macleod, dating back to 1898.
Actually, we're pretty rich in heritage. There's a lot of really good history behind the club. In 1905, the first ever provincials was actually hosted in Calgary. Fort Macleod sent a team of 4 men, and they won provincials. So that was a big thing for our club. When I said there was 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th generation of families that have been curling in the club, I think that's a testament to the club.
The proceeds from the historic event will go towards supporting the Chinook Regional Hospital's neonatal unit. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thursday marked World Alzheimer's Day. The event was first launched in 1994 by Alzheimer's Disease International. According to staff with St. Michael's Health Centre here in Lethbridge, an estimated 46,000 Albertans live with dementia. Each week, the centre provides an adult day program which helps Lethbridge seniors with memory conditions maintain independence and a connection to their community. Officials say through music, art, and other recreational activities, program participants socialize in a safe environment while their caregivers receive several hours of respite. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine during his speech at the UN Security Council. He says borders must be respected and called on Vladimir Putin to end the illegal war.
As leaders, protecting the sovereignty of our nations is one of our most sacrosanct duties. Any violation is unacceptable. It violates the very charter of this institution. It violates international law. It violates the peace and security of people. A permanent member of this Security Council, Russia, has launched and continues to wage an illegal war.
Russian military forces have launched one of their largest offensives in Ukraine since the war began more than 18 months ago. Officials say there were strikes in towns and cities from the east to the west in Ukraine. That included the capital of Kyiv, where locals heard air alerts over and over again.
Сели, друг к другу прижались, почти что на полу, как говорится, вот, сидя на полу. И тут оно как бахнет, сразу слышно звон стекол.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, speaking at the United Nations Security Council, says that criminal and unprovoked aggression by Russia must stop immediately. He says not only is Russia trying to obtain territory, but also many of Ukraine's valuable resources. He says so many lives have been senselessly lost since the beginning of the war.
Росія вбила щонайменше десятки тисяч наших людей та зробила мільйони біженцями, зруйнувавши їхній дім. Світова більшість визнає правду про цю війну. Це злочинна та неспровокована агресія Росії проти нашої нації, що має на меті захоплення території та ресурсів України.
Не представляли население Крыма и Донбасса, не требует доказательств. А безоговорочная поддержка западными столицами действий преступного киевского режима – не что иное, как нарушение принципа самоопределения вслед за грубым вмешательством во внутренние дела.
Homeowners in Hawaii are giving thanks to volunteers with the Christian relief organization Samaritan's Purse. Volunteers brought their chainsaws and helped to sift through the ashes of homes that were completely destroyed by wildfires, helping homeowners to try and find personal items.
We had this huge wildfire in the Gulch. You're standing in my neighborhood in Kula, Maui. So many of my neighbors and friends, their homes are gone.
We're here sifting through debris and ashes. We've also been doing a lot of chainsaw work. Spot fires broke out when we pulled up, so we got out a bunch of our equipment and started making sure that they're contained.
I'm like speechless about you people. You showed up with a truck, and not only a truck and all these volunteers, but the kindest, sweetest, most compassionate, most giving people I think I've ever met. I'm smiling in the middle of a tragedy because I have so much hope and I'm so uplifted really by your goodness. I can't thank you enough. Anybody, everybody is welcome because the physical work is so daunting and so overwhelming. And none of us are spring chickens. We're just so happy to have all these hard workers here, and that's what we need.
We're here for one reason alone, and that's to share the love of Jesus Christ. He gives us the strength. He gives us the ability. Being his hands and feet, there's nothing better.
Great to see the work that volunteers with Samaritan's Purse continue to do. Well, we were slightly below our seasonal average today here in southwestern Alberta, temperature-wise, and the cooler temperatures will remain for a few more days. A full look at the weather forecast is coming up. Well, we had lots of cloud cover and even some moisture in parts of southwestern Alberta today. Jeanette Roche is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, the first day of fall is Saturday, but it felt a lot like autumn again today in Lethbridge?
Yeah, well, you know, it did feel a little cooler out there today, but in a nice way. There was still plenty of sunshine and blue sky when I was out there, so I don't know what those raindrops are talking about. It was beautiful. Not a lot of wind either. Same thing tomorrow. We are looking at that high of 14 degrees. However, it might feel a little cooler than it did today because we are seeing that slight chance of rain there, about a 30% chance. Also, a lot of cloud coverage on Friday. As we get into Saturday, first day of fall, high of 19 degrees. Now, that is high seasonal, mainly cloudy skies. And then after that, look how warm it's going to get there. Sunday, 21 degrees, 23 for a high on Monday, looking at a high of 24 on Tuesday, and then back to 20 degrees on Wednesday. So I told you it's going to get warmer later on next week. Average high for this time of year, 19, average low 4 degrees. 32 was our high temperature. That happened back in 1938. And in 1995, we were sitting at -7. How's that for the beginning of fall? Not too great, I think. Okay, sunrise this morning, that happened at 7:16. Sunset this evening at 7:32 p.m. We are looking at just over 12 hours, about 12 hours and 16 minutes there of daylight today. 20 degrees on the coast there on the island, particularly Victoria. Lots of sunshine as you get closer to the water, more like 15 degrees, 20 for a high. Also in Vancouver, but high of 24. Further inland you go, 22 for a high in Edmonton, mainly sunny skies, looking at fog patches in the morning, dissipating in 20 to 40k winds. 18 for a high in Calgary, mainly sunny skies, and also at 20 to 40k wind. We're looking at sunshine across the rest of the prairies too, for the most part. High of 22 degrees in Saskatoon. Regina is sitting at 21 with lots of sunshine, 30k wind, 20 to 40k wind in Winnipeg, and a high of 20 degrees and a mix of sun and cloud there. Okay, I wasn't lying when I was saying it's a lot of sunshine. That's happening across the central part of the country as well. 22 for a high in Toronto, 23 in Ottawa, and high of 22 degrees in Montreal. Montreal also having a humidex tomorrow of 25, so it's going to feel nice and warm in Montreal tomorrow. 20 for a high in Fredericton, 18 in Halifax tomorrow. plenty of sunshine as well. Charlottetown looking at sunny skies, mostly in the afternoon. Going to see that cloud coverage in the morning there before it clears up. 17 for a high there. 10 degrees for a high in St. John's. And besides Lethbridge, it's pretty much the only place across the country that's going to see some rain. 40% chance. Also windy, looking at 40 to 60K winds and then dying down to 20 to 40K winds. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland officially introduced a bill to remove GST off of rental developments and update Canada's competition law. Housing Minister Sean Fraser says it's part of Ottawa's plan to address the housing crisis and affordability crunch. There have been calls to remove GST charges off of new purpose-built rentals to help spur construction for quite some time.
As a result of the change that we're making to remove the GST on new apartments, hundreds of thousands of homes are going to be constructed that otherwise would have sat on the shelf. Since we announced this change to the federal GST policy for home construction, provinces have followed suit and started to remove taxes on home building as well. We've seen Ontario, British Columbia, Newfoundland and Labrador. This morning, my home province of Nova Scotia, and reports that others are considering doing the same, indicate to me that federal leadership is driving change at other levels of government that are going to help accelerate the pace of home construction beyond what was previously expected.
The bill would also give the Competition Bureau the power to compel information from companies to conduct studies, tighten up merger laws, and go after collaborations that stifle competition. Airbnb says it is cracking down on fake listings on the short-term rental site. The company says it has removed around 59,000 fake listings and blocked another 157,000 from joining the site this year. Fake listings and high cleaning fees are among several issues that customers are raising with Airbnb. The company adds that more than 260,000 listings have lowered or removed cleaning fees altogether. Canadian fashion mogul Peter Nygard has pleaded not guilty to all charges against him in his Toronto sexual assault case. The 82-year-old entered his not guilty pleas as jury selection for his trial gets underway. Nygard faces 5 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of forcible confinement. The founder of the now-defunct International Women's Clothing Company is accused of using his position in the fashion industry to lure girls and women. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 423 points on the day to finish at 19,791. The Dow was down 370 points to 34,070. The S&P 500 was down 72 on the day to 4330, and the Nasdaq was down 245 points to 13,223. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 3 cents to 89.63 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 11 cents to 2.62 US. Gold was down 10.16 on the day to 19.20.15 US an ounce, and silver was up 16 cents to 23.40 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.66 per bushel, barley's at $7.40, canola's at $16.44, and corn is at $8.89 per bushel. Live cattle October contract was down $1.80 to $184.98. Feeder cattle were down 90 cents to $253.28, and lean hogs October contract was down $2.83 to $82.95. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.14 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Albertans are now able to access addiction treatment free of charge thanks to a new Lethbridge Recovery Centre. Government officials say the facility, located just east of the city, provides a 50-bed recovery community for those seeking treatment for up to a year. They say 9 more recovery communities are planned or under construction here in the province. The Lethbridge Recovery Community will provide addiction treatment for up to 200 people annually. Coming up, a fascinating interview with Orm Mitchell, who's the son of legendary Canadian author W.O. Mitchell, who discusses his new book called Magic Lies, An Evening with W.O. Mitchell. Watch that interview coming up shortly with BCN's Jeanette Rocher. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's local stories, visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Well, today we have the pleasure of being joined by Armand Mitchell, the son of iconic Canadian author W.O. Mitchell. Armand Mitchell has not only followed in his father's literary footsteps, but has adapted his biography, his dad's biography, into a captivating play. And we are here to delve into the world of this remarkable play and gain insights into what it was like growing up with such a prominent literary figure. Welcome, Armand, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
So, Armand, can you maybe start off by telling us about the inspiration behind your play called Magic Lies and what audiences can expect from it at the premiere? I guess it already premiered, didn't it?
Yes, it did on Friday. That's right. Great opening. The guy who plays it is wonderful. The way it started was the last book that my father did was An Evening with W.O. Mitchell. And it was a collection of 31 pieces. My wife and I selected and edited them, worked with him on it, and wrote little intros to each one. And when that came out in 1997, a couple of drama stage people came to us and they wanted to adapt it and do a one-man show and recreate An Evening with W.O. Mitchell in the tradition, for example, of Mark Twain Tonight. And so that's where it got its start. And its finish was at Rosebud on Friday the 15th with a wonderful opening.
Okay, so that was the opening, was the 15th. How long does it run at Rosebud through October, right?
It's going to run from the 15th, run from now until October the 21st. There was 31 productions.
Excellent. Okay. And Rosebud Theatre, of course, is so cute, and it's kind of nestled in that little corner of Alberta there. And I think that's the only place it is playing right now, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so your father, W.O. Mitchell, was a renowned Canadian author. So how has his legacy influenced your own creative pursuits, including this play?
Well, he had a major influence on my life. Not an overpowering and smothering one. He was a wonderful teacher. And in fact, he considered himself throughout his life a teacher. He taught in high schools in his early career, and then he taught creative writing programs all over Canada. And he had a major impact on my aesthetic likes and dislikes. I went on to be a university professor and teach English literature. And on a number of courses, I taught some of his books, in fact. So he had a pretty profound impact on me.
I can imagine. So what was it like growing up with him as your father? Can you share maybe many memorable anecdotes or lessons that he imparted to you about storytelling and literature?
It was exciting. Never a dull moment. He loved telling stories, and he always had experiences that he would immediately turn into a story. And I remember, storytelling was a pretty major part of our family around the kitchen table. And I remember on one occasion, Barb and I were in England, and she was doing her PhD at Leeds. And my mother and father, this is in 1991, and my mother and father came over to visit. And we did a trip up north. And then when we came back, 10 o'clock at night, it was late, the phone rang. Barb comes down to answer the phone. And W was upstairs. And you understand he's in his late 70s now. I mean, he's not all that well. And the person on the other end of the phone says, "This is the Prime Minister's office calling." And Barb thought, "Oh, that's Jeff, our son, and he's pulling a joke." And she almost told him. And then she thought, "Well, maybe it is." So she called up. W got out of bed, came downstairs, and we hear this conversation. And yes, the Prime Minister of what country? And Brian and I are looking at each other. And then the next is, "Oh, Brian, how are you?" "I'm fine, Brian. How are you?" He's on the phone with Brian Mulroney.
Oh my gosh.
Brian Mulroney has phoned to ask him if he would accept become a member of the Privy Council of Canada, which is the highest honor that you can receive. It's above the Order of Canada.
Wow.
And so W says, "Well, yes, but you better talk to my wife. And so mom comes back.
He's a
and you
very
hear
wise man, very wise man.
this voice on the other side of the phone saying, yes. Well, no, there's no way we can do that. And they were asking him to come back right away to do that.
Oh,
And
my
so
goodness.
when W got back on the phone, Brian Mulroney said, there's the voice of authority.
Yes.
And for the rest of his life, we always joked with W because one of his stories it's in the play is when some kids blow up Melvin's grandpa in the back house. And so he said, well, it's no wonder that you were made a member of the Privy Council because you know all about privies.
Oh, gosh, so funny. It just sounds like such a hoot growing up under his roof and beyond. Because, yeah, it sounds like the stories continued into his later years. And, of course, W.O. Mitchell is celebrated for his distinctive Canadian voice in literature. So how do you think that his works have contributed to the Canadian literary landscape?
Well, it's really interesting. I think he was the first, if not the first, to put Saskatchewan prairie, to put Canadian prairie and Alberta foothills on the literary map.
Wow.
In fact, when Jake and the Kid, the collection of short stories, came out in 1961, Margaret Lawrence wrote a review, and she was a very excited review about he's writing about us. And she made the point that there were actually gophers in some of these stories, and there were details of the Canadian landscape. And she said, he gave us license to write about ourselves. And I think that was true.
Yeah, well, you just mentioned it right there, the landscape. So, because his storytelling often showcased prairie landscape and the human condition. So, how do you think that your play, now Magic Lies, draws or pays homage to those themes?
Well, Magic Lies opens with W.O. talking about the prairie. He says something like, I was born a gopher, and I think I'll probably die a gopher. And it ends with a passage from Who's Seen the Wind, which is a wonderful lyrical prose about prairie. And it's interesting, though, that he wrote about prairie, he wrote about foothills people, but his stories, he made them travel. They're universally, internationally known. There's a Chinese translation of Who's Seen the Wind that came out about 8 years ago. There's a South Korean, there's Ukrainian. In fact, with the Chinese translation, the woman who did it, she had picked up Who's Seen the Wind. She was in Toronto. She picked it up in the library. She started reading, and she couldn't put it down because it took her back. The prairie landscape took her back to the Inner Mongolian steppes. So there's a story that jumps.
Right, jumps the ocean. It resonates with people beyond just Canada. Well, okay, so Who Has Seen the Wind, one of his most famous novels. Are there other notable literary works that have maybe had an impact on Canadian literature and culture?
Yes, I think there are. I think his top three, the novels that will go on, are Who Has Seen the Wind, which has now sold well over 1 million copies just in Canada alone. The other one is a kind of a bookend one. It's called How I Spent My Summer Holidays. And it's almost as if the character Brian, young Brian in Who's Seen the Wind, grew up. He's now an adolescent. And it's a slightly darker book, but it's a very powerful book. And then the other one is The Vanishing Point. And The Vanishing Point is particularly relevant today because it is about his experience. It's built on his experience with the Stoney Nakoda at the Eden Valley Reserve. He taught out there for a year in the early 50s. And he wrote this novel about red and white relationships. And the vision in that novel is so relevant today. Vanishing Point has been out of print for about 10 years, but Freehand Books, Calgary publisher, is going to bring out a new edition sometime in the next year.
Isn't that interesting? And you mentioned the other one, How I Spent My Summer Holiday. Almost sounds like a kid's book report or something, or like an essay when they get back to school in, grade 5 or something. But then you say it's got kind of a darker theme. I think I've heard that Jake and the Kid is another beloved work by your father there. So what elements of that collection do you find most resonates with Canadian readers today?
Well, that CBC series, it ran as a radio series for 6 years from 1950 to 56. And then it continually was repeated over the years into the 70s. And that whenever Jake and the Kid came on, it was originally on Sunday afternoons about 4:00. All of Canada tuned in. It was their story. And Jake and the Kid is built to a large extent on the tradition of tall tale telling. And Jake is always telling the kids one tall tale after another. And it's a part of the kids' education. The tall tale is used as a kind of, like the fable used to be used, for to teach some kind of moral. And for example, in the Jake and the Kid series, there are at least a dozen scripts which address the racism against our First Nations people. There's a character, Moses' left hand, who appears in that. There's also stories against, there's one very powerful story called Going to a Fire, where the prairies could be very racist about our immigrants, what used to be called DPs. And there's a Ukrainian character who is the brunt of, and he and his family are the brunt of some racism. It was such a powerful story. The Minister of Agriculture at the time got in touch with WO and wanted a copy. And the National Film Board made a film documentary called Fires of Envy. And it was used in schools all across Canada as a kind of, stories that explore racism and are in such a way they say, look, don't do this. Don't do this to each other.
Yeah. There you go. So there's a lesson right there too. That's so interesting. Okay, so getting back to your own play here, Magic Lies, which was adapted from your dad's biography. So as a playwright, did you encounter any challenges while developing that play, and how did you overcome them to bring it to the premiere stage?
Okay, so there were one challenge in particular. And Barb and I, Barb is the co-writer. Barb and I are kind of a literary duet. We started doing literary duets some time ago. We did the two-volume biography of my father together. So what we realized was that you can't just have a one-man show where someone gets up on stage and then tells one story after another. There has to be connective tissue between those stories. And so that when the audience finishes watching that show, they don't go away with, oh, there's some interesting stories. They go away with the sense that the whole of that play was more than just a sum of its parts. So that was tricky. And that's where we used a lot of our biography to weave together and go and flow from one story into another. And Nathan Smith, who plays WO, I tell you, he is absolutely wonderful. It almost brought tears to our eyes in the audience, because he really did succeed in giving the audience an evening with W.O. Mitchell doing his wonderful story.
Yeah, and just kind of bringing him back to life. Absolutely. So finally, what message or experience do you hope that the audience will take away from Magic Lies, and what do you envision as its lasting impact on the Canadian community of theatergoers and readers alike?
Well, there are a number of stories in it that have a serious intent, but the thing that we wanted people to go away with was that they had a really fun evening, listening to some wonderful stories told in a very, very engaging way. And at the same time, you see, Dad used to say that his stories, that every bit was the truth, every single bit, character traits and in the characters, sensuous bits in setting scene and so on. All of those are actual true bits and pieces of reality. But what he does as a writer, he weaves them together into a big lie, a magic lie. And it's a magic lie because it helps the reader explore larger universal human truths. And so that's what we hope people will go away with. First, that they have a lot of fun. And in fact, that opening night, that audience was having a lot of fun. They laughed in the right places. And in fact, there's some very moving parts in it. My father used to say, when you tell stories, you want to make them laugh and make them cry. You want to use one against the other in order to gain that powerful effect of people listening to story magic.
Oh, that is so wonderful. And looks like Magic Lies runs from September 15th through October 21st at the Rosebud Opera House stage, right, Ormond?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, all right. Is it going to be showing anywhere else in Canada after that?
Well, we hope that some people, in fact, I got an email this morning from someone in Edmonton, and he said, is this going to be a chance to be set up and played in Edmonton? Because I really want to see this, but Rosebud is a little far. So I sent that on to the Rosebud people and says, have you got any other plans for it? So,
Okay, let them deal with it. Sounds good. Armand, it looks like we're about out of time here, but thanks so much for joining us today.
well, thank you very much for having me. This was fun.
The winter season sees southern Alberta powdered with the white stuff, and I'm talking about snow, which attracts lots of avid skiers to the area. And Cole Fawcett is the go-to guy for all things related to preparing for an exhilarating time on the slopes. He offers valuable insights into the meticulous process of readying the ski hill for the season, shedding light on the behind-the-scenes efforts that ensure optimal conditions and what to watch out for. Cole, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Naveen. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And now, as the ski season at Castle Mountain approaches, what are the key steps you recommend for avid skiers and snowboarders to prepare themselves for the season on the slopes?
Yeah, great question. So if we can we don't want to lapse into not working out, not being active through the fall season. I think that's all too tempting for so many of us as the days get a little bit shorter and the temperatures get a bit cooler. So trying our best to keep active and even if we can get a little bit of strength training in to keep those legs and that core strong for the coming ski season, because we're going to need those muscles when the snow hits the ground. Aside from that, we want to be looking at our gear, making sure that it's ready for the season. And for most of us, that's only going to necessitate a tune-up of skis or snowboards, so a wax or a sharpen of the edges or a grind of the base to make it nice and smooth and flat again. And of course, that wax on top to make sure that it slides really nice on the snow. So I think those are probably the two major things. And aside from that, it pays to think ahead with respect to looking at season passes or frequency cards, what we call our WOW card, to save money, of course, before the season gets here.
So you talked about physically preparing yourself for the season. Now, before we started recording this interview, I revealed to you that I'm not really into skiing. I'm very much a novice. So what would you recommend to someone like myself who is probably going to be hitting the slopes for the first time this year?
So for first timers, there are a lot of great resources out there. Visiting any resort's website and exploring lesson options is going to be probably the most pivotal thing. And of course, I mean, the other things that you probably go without saying, like making sure that you have, a nice warm jacket, nice warm snow pants or ski pants, appropriate clothing in general terms is really essential. First timers generally aren't going to run out to a ski shop and buy all the equipment they need, like ski boots, skis, or snowboard and snowboard boots. And that's certainly not necessary. All of the resorts within Alberta and British Columbia and further afar are going to offer equipment rentals. So usually you're going to want to look at a beginner snowboard or a beginner ski package. And by package, we mean it's going to come with instruction. It's going to come with the equipment you need in terms of that technical equipment, like the skis or the snowboard and the boots and the bindings. It will also come with a helmet, which we highly recommend. Nobody wants to knock the noggin while they're out there. And it will come with a ticket, a lift ticket, which is a little thing that you'll just put on your person that allows you access to the ski lifts. And so when you combine that equipment, the instruction, and the lift ticket, those are usually all packaged together at a reasonably attractive rate and on a full day or a half day basis. And that is the best way to introduce yourself to the sport, bar none.
Absolutely, because it sounds like it's all inclusive. It has everything you need there. So could you provide insights into what goes on behind the scenes and the process for preparing the ski hill for the upcoming season?
So, I mean, preparing for the season to come really starts with the end of the season prior. So, you know, as a resort, we're going through processes like establishing budgets and guidelines for and operational dates, as an example, setting those dates out for when we're going to be open the following season, putting plans in place to get enough staff. And then on a more technical term, there's a team of about 24 staff members at Castle Mountain Resort specifically that are here full-time year-round, getting things ready. And a good deal of those folks are on the outside operations or maintenance side of our business. And they're in a situation where they're doing all kinds of off-season preventative maintenance on lifts, on snowcats, on other equipment, such as buildings, of course, snowmaking equipment. So the snow machines that make snow early season to kind of get us that great base on which we start the season on. So we're not, you know, encountering as many other obstacles that may lie beneath the snow coverage. And then we have a number of off-season projects too, kind of lumped on top of all of those normal things that we just have to do each and every season, that normal off-season maintenance. So in terms of what we're doing this season at Castle, we have purchased another new snowcat, which aren't cheap. They're multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
When you make that investment. Wonderfully capable machines, but extraordinarily expensive. We have added some snowmaking equipment to our fleet to get us in a position where we can be open reliably when we say we intend to be. There is some building maintenance going on, some new roofing on our staff accommodation, some interior upgrades within the day lodge and our cafeteria and our washrooms, and then some equipment upgrades with one of our lifts. The Huckleberry chairlift is getting a new digital drive, which is more or less the brain of the lift and will help us increase the reliability of that lift for years to come.
Now, you've touched on this a bit with improvements you've made to the resort, but for those that might be new to Castle Mountain, what are the distinctive features of your resort that really set it apart from the others? And what should visitors be particularly excited about?
Well, first and foremost, if you're from the greater Lethbridge area, this is the closest Rocky Mountain resort to anybody living in greater Lethbridge or really anybody in the southwestern portion of the province. So that in and of itself is important to note. You know, Castle has some exceptional terrain. It's has a great variety and has great terrain for advanced and expert level skiers, intermediates and beginners too. But one of the things that really sets us apart from some of our competitors is the mountains on which we occupy. We have an abundance of terrain, and we see the most snow on average in the province of Alberta, period, of any other resort.
Wow.
Aside from that, there is a certain, I think, different feel to Castle. It's more laid back, it's more homey. It is owned and operated by the community. We have over 200 shareholders who are almost exclusively Albertans and who put their money into the resort basically to see it continue to exist kind of from the mid-90s onward when it wasn't quite as vibrant and it wasn't in a position where it was sustainable. And today, at least at this point in time, we are on a path to sustainability and on a path to upgrading some of the assets that we have here, some of the older lifts, as an example.
And beyond skiing itself, resorts often offer a variety of activities and events. Could you share some of the events and activities that Castle Mountain has planned for this upcoming season?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of the specific dates, we're in a situation where those are still being mulled over, I guess you could say. Most of our programming is going to be ski or snowboard related, whether it's an on-mountain scavenger hunt, or it's a ski race, or a freestyle competition, or a big mountain competition. Most of what we have here is going to take place on the snowy slopes in some way, shape, or form. As far as non-skiing stuff goes, we do offer a cross-country ski network here at the resort. It's pretty small, but it exists. And adjacent to us within the Castle Provincial Park, there are some maintained, groomed cross-country skiing and snowshoe trails, very close proximity to us. And I mean, aside from that, the other thing that we have that's unique to Castle and is actually very unique in North America is we have kind of what most people would think of as a ski resort with ski lifts, and you take the lift up and you ski down a run, and it may be all natural terrain or like powder, or it may be groomed nightly. But we also have something called cat skiing or snow cat skiing. And that's where you actually hop into one of these snow cats, and it has a cabin on the back of it that's kind of like a mini bus in a sense, but it's capable of climbing snow-covered mountains. And cat skiing for us is a very exclusive experience. It's only 12 people per day, 5 days a week, and they get about 1,000 acres of skiable terrain all to themselves. So that's very unique. A lot of cat skiing operations are like in the backcountry. Sometimes you'll fly in via helicopter, or there'll be heli skiing operations. But at Castle, we actually have both of those operations kind of side by each. In fact, you actually take one of the chairlifts to get up to the cat, and then every run you go up the lift, up the cat, ski down, and then repeat that several times a day. So
that cat skiing sounds a lot of fun. So what recommendations do you have for visitors regarding maintenance and selecting the right equipment for the conditions they might occur at the mountain?
Yeah, well, some might say, especially if you're in the ski industry, you can never have enough pairs of skis or snowboards. But really, that's not a feasible thing for most of the population. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, you want to select. I'm not a great expert in this field. There are some great experts in equipment selection at retail stores across Alberta and beyond, of course, and some great resources online. But certainly doing your homework, putting some time into understanding what ski or snowboard works best in what conditions, and putting some thought into where you like to go on the mountains and what type of terrain you like to access. Those are all really valuable things to put a little bit of time and thought into. But certainly there's no substitute for visiting your local ski or snowboard shop. These folks that are generally employed there live, eat, and breathe the sport.
That's amazing. Now, snow quality is a major factor for skiers. How does Castle Mountain manage the snowmaking and grooming operations to ensure consistent and high quality snow cover throughout the season? You talked about purchasing new equipment in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So prior to 2019, we didn't make snow here at all. We relied solely on what Mother Nature brought us. And that is in itself a huge risk to the business, of course. But we have, over the last I guess, 4 years primarily, we've invested more than $2 million in snowmaking infrastructure. And this is a big part of the reason why, right this moment in time, we're, not announcing, new lift infrastructure going in, because those are extraordinarily expensive, pardon me. We're still working on paying down, some of the debt from the major infrastructure that we've put in, and most notably snowmaking. So generally speaking, we are making snow where we have that underground infrastructure. So maybe I'll back up. In order to make snow, you need high pressure water and high pressure air. And that stuff doesn't just magically appear on the mountain. It's piped up there. So underground, there are kilometers of steel pipe for water. And then that is connected and electrical too. So we need electricity. So we've got electrical cabling and water piping going up the mountain in various locations. And the snow machine or the snow maker is connected to that at where we need it, at those pedestals, I guess we call them, or outlets for water and electricity. So if you can just imagine the infrastructure that's in a city to get water to your home, as an example, we have something similar to that here, except on a mountain in the Rockies. So that's really pivotal. Most resorts are going to have this. And of course, we're no exception in this day and age. And so you connect your snowmaking equipment, your guns, sometimes they're referred to, or machines. And basically that high pressure water is thrust up into the air with high pressure air, and it falls down as snow. Slightly more scientific than that. But when it's cold enough, it'll just fall down as snow. So when we talk about getting ready for the season, snowmaking is a really essential part of this. We spend dozens and dozens and dozens of days and hundreds, if not thousands, of human hours on making it. And it's all in the name of getting a good surface down in the event that Mother Nature doesn't deliver. And even if she does, it serves as a great base to help protect us and our equipment from some of the natural hazards that lie beneath.
Well, that was very educational and informative for me. I hope that our viewers got a lot out of that too. That was Cole Fawcett with the Castle Mountain Ski Resort. Cole, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.